Good morning. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Good to see you, Joe.
Well,
It's been a bit since I've seen you in person, I guess.
few weeks. Yeah. Welcome back to
Yeah,
Salt Lake.
yeah.
Yeah. You made the trip all the way from NYC. So good
Only
to see you.
slightly jet lagged.
Only slightly jet lag. It's fine. Cool.
It's
Good.
great to meet you, Malcolm.
Likewise.
Actually, this is
How was
actually
your weekend?
Uh, it sucked. I was doing my taxes all weekend. Like every year, I just say to myself, "Man, I need an accountant. Man, I need an accountant." Man, and then all of a sudden, I look up and it's like April. I was like, "Oh, all right. I guess it's too late to get an accountant." So, it's interesting. TurboTax has this gamification kind of feature, and you log in, and it's like 3.5 hours. Go, like you can do this. You got this. And it took me 10.
Oh, geez.
I'm sorry.
That's just actually directly interacting with TurboTax. It doesn't even take into account like me offline, like going into all of my various accounts and like downloading and printing forms, and like it was all weekend. So I'm glad it's done. But man, we got to simplify the tax code. Holy free holy.
Oh no, I agree. It would be nice if I think in other countries they actually just tell you what they think your taxes are, then you just tell them, yeah, that makes sense. Here it's a guessing game. It's like, the onus is on the taxpayer to say, oh well, what do you think this number looks like? They're like, yeah, no, not really. They already know.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Yeah, they know. Right.
Yeah, let's like us. I
We're
would
on
say
a
our tax.
business
Yeah,
show.
it's
That's
business taxes are
complicated.
different,
We're not-
right?
It's
But
a different game, right? It's a whole lobbying game. We know how this works. Like various companies that lobby to make sure that the tax code stays as it is. It stays complicated. But that the IRS does not automate its data processes. That's one way to look at it.
yeah, if only it could be a data product.
Oh,
Whoa.
if only. Well, great segue, Joe.
Hey. Yeah. So, Malcolm, for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Malcolm Hawker. I'm the head of data strategy for Prophecy Software. We make MDM software. Previous to that, I was a Gartner analyst for 3 years. So I'm the co-author of the last 3 MDM Magic Quadrant documents. Previous to that, I worked for this little data company called Dun & Bradstreet for a period of 7 years. To make a long story really short, I've worn every hat. I've been a consultant. I've been an analyst. I've led a IT organization of a $2 billion publicly traded company. Worked for software companies, like you name it, vendors, supplier. I've been a customer across the board when it comes to data and analytics. So I've done just about it all.
Jeez. Well, you haven't been on a podcast though yet. So.
No, well, that's exactly right. This is the pinnacle, right? I know I've arrived when I've made it onto your podcast. So I'm
yeah. So all the Gartner stuff's cool and running a $2 billion company data team and stuff. But yeah,
small potatoes.
Yeah, well, welcome to the big leagues. Awesome. Yeah, we're going to talk about data product management. I guess to kind of level set, So I see the term data product being thrown around, like candy. It seems like everything's a data product now. Taxes are probably a data product soon. What would you define a data product to be?
Honestly, a data product is any data, right? Any data that solves a specific business problem that a stakeholder would otherwise be willing to pay for. I mean, it's that simple. Right? It is something that solves a problem that the person consuming it would otherwise be willing to pay for. So there's 2 key things there. One is that a product is something that addresses a need or solves a problem, right? Very simple stuff. 2 is value, right? There has to be value to the equation of a product. Would you be willing to pay for it? I see so much hand wringing on LinkedIn and other areas and communities and channels where people are talking about like, what's a data product and building these complex frameworks and methodologies and like spending a lot of time trying to figure out is it a field? Is it a table? Is it a schema? Is it an API? Is it a marketplace? What are data products? And I look at that as kind of crazy making. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just like, if you asked a product manager to define a product, they pretty much say exactly what I just said. And I was a product manager. The first 10 years of my professional career, I was on the product management track. I was actually the chief product officer of a small software company that got bought out by NetSuite. And if you asked a product manager, like, what's a product, they would pretty much say what I just said. But in the data world, what we love to do is start at the bottom of everything. So a product manager would generally start at the top, meaning what's the need, what's the problem, right? And then work their way down to all the product attributes that would be required to solve the need. But what we do in the data world is we start at the bottom. We start with the inventory of raw materials.
Yep.
Right. And we say, okay, well, here's all my total inventory of raw materials. And then we try to work our way up to a problem. It's completely backwards.
Oh,
right?
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that rant that I posted in Geneva a couple weeks ago, where I was just walking down the street and I decided to film, a rant, because why not? Great setting for it. But it was the backwards comment is exactly right. Where I feel like, because we're data people, we always start the conversation with data. The business could care less, frankly. I know you've seen this over and over again. Yep. I really like how you define data product as something that somebody would pay money for, because that's what a product is at the end of the day, right?
Right.
And that's the kind of thinking I think we need to get to. Lead with the problem, lead with something besides data. Talk in ways that people can understand. I think all too often we confuse the hell out of everyone else, including ourselves, at which point you should definitely probably take a step back and assess like how we communicate. You're absolutely spot on.
Yeah. We love to do it. Sorry, Matt, I interrupted.
Oh, no. Sorry to interrupt you. I mean, the reality is we've been floating around this idea of data-driven for years now, but virtually any business is data-driven, and every business actually has lots of data products, but they don't necessarily prioritize them or make them good data products.
Yeah. I mean, I use data-driven. I think it's fine. As we are wont to do in the data space, we like to parse things out and just kind of analyze endlessly. I prefer customer-driven, right? Oh. Like if I had to make a choice, I think it should really, if I was the CEO of a company, would I be out there saying we need to be data-driven? No, I'd be saying let's be customer-driven. Let's be customer-driven and relentlessly focused on customers. I use data-driven as a term. I think it's fine, right? There's some things that it implies, like, using data to make decisions and using data to optimize business processes. Those things are all great. If I had to choose, I'd be like, let's focus on the customer. As a pithy slogan, being data-driven is fine. But I think we do lose track, right? Like we do, to your point, Joe, we make it about the data. We make it about what we do, and the business couldn't care less, right? Like they just don't care.
No, and in fact, I think it irritates them to some degree too after a while, because it's like, well, when I got started, I got started and worked in like sales and marketing and helped with driving campaigns and using data techniques, math and so forth. Well, math isn't really data techniques or something thing, but anyway, what I'm saying, to solve business problems. But I don't think we worshipped at the altar of data at the time. It was like, sales and marketing were like, yeah, we need to drive sales. How can you help us do that? And if you can do it with data, cool. If you can do it with other things, great. But we need to sell. That's what we want to do. So
exactly, to your point about like maybe even irritating the business. I mean, what I've seen is a lot of finger waving, right? Like, oh, the business just doesn't get it, right? Oh, the business, they don't understand. They're maybe illiterate. They don't get it, and you can lead that horse to water, but it's not good. Like that's would you be talking about your customers that way, right? Like if you were a product manager making a widget, right? Like I'm making a widget and nobody wanted to use your widget, or they didn't know how to turn it on, or the return rates were high, or people were calling the call center because they couldn't figure out how to get any value from your widget. Would you be waving your finger at the users? No. Mm-hmm. Wow, my Canadian accent just came out. That's amazing.
Not the show.
That doesn't happen very often. I just said
before the show, we were talking about how you just moved to Florida, which we can talk about later.
Yeah, well, I'm originally from Western Canada, but I lost my accent a long time ago. But it just popped.
You gotta be careful in places like Florida, man. They might
Yeah, well, you never know. That could be like, I don't know, like a siren song for gators. They hear Canadian accents and they just come out of the woodwork. Anyway, if you were making a widget and nobody wanted to use your widget or was frustrated by it, you wouldn't blame them, right? You wouldn't say, well, the business just doesn't get it. They don't understand how powerful this widget is, right? They just, you can lead that horse to water. They're just not going to drink the widget. No, you'd say we missed the mark. We missed a requirement. We fundamentally don't understand how the business is getting any value from the widget, and we need to figure this out, right? So, I mean, this is the mindset I think that we need to have if we are serious about data as a product or data products.
Yeah.
It's not about necessarily data as a product. To me, it's about product management and applying product management as a discipline into data management, meaning starting at the top, understanding customer needs, intimately understanding how customers interact with data and how they get value from data and what they would or wouldn't be willing to pay for it. It's those kind of things. There's that kind of mindset shift that I think we need to make. And that's kind of why I'm excited about kind of talk at the very least about data products, because to me, if you want a data product, then you should hire a data product manager. And if you hire a real product manager with experience in product management, with this experience in doing things like market analysis and competitive intelligence and pricing and go-to-market, product lifecycle management, all of those things, right, that a product manager would know how to do, go hire a product manager and put them responsible for your data product. Because if you do that, I think it's nothing but goodness.
I agree. And for the audience, can you briefly explain what does a product manager do, and maybe what are some of the top best practices a product manager needs to keep in mind? Because we're going to tie this back to data product management in a second.
Right. Well, so one thing in mind, notice that you could apply the label of product owner, but in the product manager world, they just don't do that, right? Product managers are ambassadors. Product managers are collaborators. They're coordinators. They go and work with supply chain. They go and work with logistics. They go and work with sales and marketing. They go to work with finance. They pull all these people together and they bring them from across the organization to figure out how to create something of value and actually how to assign the value itself. So product management is a number of different things, but first and foremost, it's about building products. Right. It's about understanding customer needs and building the products to address those needs. Right. So it's about, again, working across the organization to pull all those pieces together to create a product, right, to value the product and then to take the product to market. Right. Meaning go to market. What do I need from a sales perspective? What do I need from it's the 5 P's of product management, right? Price, product, promotion, packaging, and P, distribution. Like, how do I actually get it to end users? So product managers bring all of these things together and they manage those products across their entire life cycle, not just launch, right? How do I launch a product? How do I build it? And how do I launch it? And how do I support it? But also sunset, which is another thing that we just don't do in the data world, right? Like we just let stuff sit out there forever, right? We barely, we just archive things forever and ever and ever. But, a product manager would say, okay, well, this product has run its course. Right, we are not seeing as much revenue here. The support costs are too high for the amount of revenue that we're pulling in. Let's go sunset that product. So product managers do all these things, and they do it in a collaborative, cross-functional way across the entire organization. And product managers will tell you, well, yes, I own a P&L, right? I will own a profit and loss for this product, but I really don't own any of these processes, right? I don't own them. All I'm doing is acting as a coordinator across all of these various groups like sales, marketing, finance, logistics, supply chain, you name it. And I'm coordinating across them to make sure that I can actually deliver value to my customers. So I think that's the kind of the mindset that we need to have in the data world instead of like, I own. If anybody's been following me on LinkedIn, I'm on a bit of a data ownership rant these days.
Saw your post last week about that.
Yeah,
it's good.
I did another one this morning. It's just, I just think the whole notion of a data owner is just not productive, right? Because first of all, it's very poorly defined. What does that even mean? What does data owner mean? If you kind of looked at the DAMA, their definition, it's mostly about governance definition, policy definition, and policy enforcement. And when is that ever one person? Right? When would one person ever be responsible defining the governance policies and enforcing those governance policies for any bit of data? It's never just one person. It's never just one person. It's a collaborative effort. But what I see over and over again is people think that data owners, well, I own, right? I own, and I'm going to get the business to smarten up and stop doing dumb things to my data.
Yeah, every time I've seen that happen, that person ends up being like a huge annoyance to the company and people ignore them.
Well, exactly. Exactly. And if you roll into a conference room with somebody and the first thing you say is, well, I own customer data. Just take customer. It could be anything, right? and you're talking to somebody in sales, well, good luck with that conversation. Or if you go talk to somebody in finance and say, well, I own customer data, and you're talking to the person who's recognizing the revenue for your deals, also good luck with that conversation.
Yeah.
It's not a great place to start from. It would immediately kind of put you on your heels if you walk in and say, well, I own that data. Right. Well, no, you don't. You may shepherd it. You may kind of steward it. You may be responsible for making sure the policies get documented. You may be responsible for making sure those policies actually get enforced. But the idea of owning the data kind of outright is a little goofy
It's
from my
off-putting
perspective.
too, right? I would just sit there and give you your participation trophy and have you go on your way. So, it's like,
well,
get out of my office now before I get really mad at you.
Well,
So,
right. But you could go in instead and say, hey, listen, how do I help you make more money?
yeah.
Right? Like, how can I help you make more money or sell more products or recognize revenue faster or onboard suppliers faster? I mean, whatever. There's like a zillion business processes you could be focused on. Go in with that mindset and say, how do we do this better, faster, stronger, right? And how can we use data to make you a rock star in the organization? Like, that's a great conversation to have. Nobody's going to kick you out of the office if you start the conversation that way.
No. It's usually, I think for the audience, that's how we'd recommend that you should do that if you
exactly
want to make friends and influence people and that kind of stuff.
Just something data people tend to be bad at, right? Like they come from a technical world and maybe they have
sometimes, sometimes, but I notice there's also a cross section of data people who come from I would say more of a semantic world too, and so forth, and those types of people can be insanely useful, but also insanely pedantic. It's like, well, what do you mean by owner? And then it becomes, I don't know, one of those conversations where I'm gonna need to drink a bottle of vodka after I'm done with this one. So, or during actually, yeah, and so
right.
Or margaritas, I suppose, in the case of Florida. So
yeah, I think anything goes here, right?
Yeah.
Margarita
Everything does go in Florida.
What's that?
Everything does go in Florida, man. It's like a different world.
So. Yeah, for me, it's gluten-free beer. That's
nice.
That's my jam. I went gluten-free a little while ago, so yeah.
Nice, good for you.
Yeah.
This is interesting though. It's no, I'm liking your post, and I noticed they've been getting a lot of good comments too, right? So it struck a nerve somehow with the LinkedIn data world. So, congrats.
Well, what I find amazing, so I was with Gartner for 3 years, and I wasn't active online by choice. Gartner analysts, I mean, when you're an analyst at Gartner, it's just pounded into your head over and over and over again to be agnostic, to not show favoritism, to not even overtly like anything, because you could create the impression that you like a vendor or you like a product or something. So I just avoided, generally when I was at Gartner, I avoided being on LinkedIn, as most Gartner analysts do, by the way. And then one of the reasons why I joined Prophecy is because it's like I got to go and do a podcast, and these, my own podcast, CDO Matters, and this podcast, and I could be on LinkedIn, and I could write blogs, and I could go to industry events, and I could use my voice, and I could go on these rants. And one of the things that I'm really blown away with, and I mean this sincerely, is the quality of input on LinkedIn. Right? Like, sure, there's a lot of there's some trolls out there, and every now and then, there's these kind of just not productive comments, and people can be a little snide at times, but the quality of the comments and the input that I get from the people, at least in my community, I'm just blown away by. And what you'll see me often do is that I'll say something like, here's the 5 things you need to think about for blah blah blah, whatever it is. And then I'll get comments, and I'm like, yeah, I missed that. As a matter of fact, the whole idea of value being intrinsic to the definition of a data product was something that a guy named Brian O'Neill, like we had this little debate on LinkedIn, and I was like, you know what, Brian, you're right. I that absolutely needs to be part of the definition of product. So what you'll see me do on LinkedIn is, I'll say, here's the 5 things, and then I'll make a comment to myself, say, you know what, here's the 7 things, because I missed 2 things. Because people brought other stuff up that are completely and totally valid. So I'm like blown away by the quality of insight that I see out on LinkedIn. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, it's awesome. And I think you should always post with the expectation of discovering there's probably some flaw in your reasoning, or maybe some blind spot you just didn't consider. I think that just kind of goes to the territory. And as you point out too, I always reserve about 10% of people at least who are probably just going to hate you no matter what and just troll you, because that's how the world is, and those people, you just ignore them. And let them, I guess, I don't know, fume in their mom's basement or whatever they do. So, or their dad's basement. It could be
I
that
guess
too.
so. Could be anybody's. It could
Or
be
Matt's
anybody's.
grandma's basement. I'm just kidding. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it is interesting. And but I do know that, I mean, the nice thing with LinkedIn, I would say, is that there's at least like a sense of decorum, right? So it's not Twitter. It's not a complete wasteland.
Yeah.
There it still seems like a professional network that also, it's like if Facebook and LinkedIn of 2010 had a kid, I guess it would now be LinkedIn in 2023. LinkedIn used to be like very buttoned up and professional. I think COVID sort of relaxed a lot of that, it seems, but in a good way, obviously. But
yeah,
people are more willing to have, I think, engaging debates versus just talk about how awesome their resume is and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah,
well,
it's good
what
interactions on your posts. So it's cool.
Yeah, and it's what again, I like the quality of the input. One thing that I'm like really sensitive to is just like not selling. And I barely, I give my employer a lot of credit. They don't want me actually selling, right? What they want me for is to become a trusted advisor in the data space, right? And to share what I know and to build a community around that, and build a community around the insight that I have. And it's interesting when people are out there overtly shilling, like there's some people that just respond to my comments, no matter what. Doesn't matter what I'm talking about, right? And let's just say they work for an axe company. I don't know why I said axe. I don't know, but
Axe body spray,
like,
or the
no, like I don't know.
Yeah,
Canadian. Yeah,
Canadian
like
axe.
let's assume they work for a widget company. Let's go with widget. Let's say they work for a widget company. I'll make a post about, about data governance or data strategy or MDM or data products. And the answer is always, you need a widget.
Yeah.
No matter to anything I post, right? It's like, here's all these different, well, you need a widget. Well, all these things would be addressed by a widget. I those posts kind of make me chuckle.
Oh no, what are you gonna say about?
No, I mean, I agree. In general, I think in the data space, we've gotten very into this idea that you can just throw technology at something. Just put technology on it; we'll take care of all your problems. When in reality, that's technology is important, but it's just a small slice of data product.
Yeah, we found that out the hard way. I think numerous times. Yeah. But it's funny too, because you're absolutely right. People will drop into the comments, parachute in, and then talk about how awesome the product is, whether or not it makes any sense. And the thing is, I'll tell this to people out there too, especially the sales and marketing people at these companies that think it's a good idea to drop in the comments. I don't know of any single situation where I've ever bought a product because you dropped into my comments and said, "Oh, you should. This solves all your problems." In fact, I think it's super annoying. I don't know anybody who's bought a product this way. So my advice is, as Malcolm's doing, right? Like, sell without selling. Yeah. This is, like, become a thought leader, like have some beef behind your ideas. Don't just spam people in the comments with your stupid product. So I'll call it stupid because your approach is stupid. Maybe your product's awesome, but
It's a little old school, right? Like it's just a little old school.
It is.
And people see through that stuff, right? Like just people see through it. If you're just out there overtly shilling whatever, your widget, people are like, all right, whatever. Right. Like this is not valuable to me. Right. I need to know how to better govern my data or better manage my data or optimize my data and analytics organization. And, just selling is not helping. So people want and now expect, I think to a certain degree, like to receive value from their interactions with these platforms. And I think they can from LinkedIn, which is a really, really good thing.
Oh, it's super rare too, because it's a chance, I would say, for companies to evangelize their products in a very tasteful, forward-thinking way that it does add value to the conversation, like you're saying. Yeah. It's hopefully people do that. Actually, John O'Gorman, what's up, John? He's actually a fellow Canadian. You guys may have lived in the same mountain range at one point. He maybe gone to the same fur trading events back in the day.
Bought the same axes.
Axe trading events. But he asked, are there any significant differences between data products and other products? It seems like one of those pesky semantics angles would be one.
But I honestly, I don't see any fundamental difference, right, at all. Maybe I should, or maybe we could have a conversation. I'm open to being wrong. I'm wrong a lot. Just ask my wife. But I mean, I don't really see any fundamental differences there. Maybe with some nuance around your pool of raw materials is limited to a certain degree, right? Like if you defined a customer need and said, I need A, B, C, D, and you didn't have item number D, right? Because it's just not there. The data isn't there. Well, I think that could be problematic and it act as a constraint. But from the perspective of any other product, I mean, there's other issues like, I mean, the marginal costs with data products are like zero. You can just keep printing them and printing them and printing them. They tend to have a perpetual shelf life, generally, often, or not entirely, but they're a little more durable. They last a little bit more. Some of the stuff that Doug Laney has written about kind of data, how to value data, I think is really, really relevant here. I would absolutely recommend going back and reading Infonomics if you have not. Kind of goes into some of the unique characteristics of data and how to value data. But at a really, really high level, the answer to John's question is, I don't really see a ton of material differences here. And I think you could easily apply kind of product management as a discipline to data products, and you'd be in a great place.
So let's go a little deeper on this value idea. You mentioned earlier that often as product manager, you're responsible, you at least have accountability for a P&L, even if there are many different owners. So if I'm thinking about an internal data product, so not one that goes directly to customers, but one that's used by the CEO, for example, how do I think about a P&L in that case?
What a great question. This is the fundamental stumbling block as far as I'm concerned. This idea of valuing data or data products, right? When I was a Gartner analyst, easily this was the number one stumbling block that was holding companies back from realizing, better value from data and analytics as a whole, right? How do I figure out, what value this thing is driving, right? If I improve my data quality, or if I build a better data integration pattern, or if I build a data warehouse, how much value does that actually deliver to the organization? There's a couple of different ways to do it, right? There's value, right, from a kind of a top line perspective. Then there's value from just a cost basis perspective. How much does this actually cost, right? One is the numerator and the other one is the denominator from an ROI perspective, the benefit versus the cost. I would argue you need to probably figure out both of those, but if at the very least, if you can figure out one of them, that would even be better. A lot of companies just look from the cost perspective. They don't look from the benefit perspective. I had a lot of conversations when I was a Gartner analyst with CDOs and CIOs would call me up and say, this sounds great, Malcolm, the whole kind of valuing data thing. This sounds great. But the benefits here are so indirect. I would argue you can't do this. Right? You can't figure out how much it's worth the organization to improve their data quality. And to that, I would say incorrect. You absolutely positively can. It is a modeling exercise. But we model stuff all the time. If anybody is good at modeling, data people are good at modeling, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, there is a model that needs to be built that says something and this is just one example, by the way. Mm. If I improve my customer data quality by 10%, and yes, data quality is subjective, but you can put measures on it. You can absolutely positively measure data quality. If you improve your customer data quality by 10%, what will that yield to the organization? Will you sell more? Will you reduce your costs? Will you reduce your risks? I would argue you can absolutely positively model that. Mm-hmm. That is the value equation, right? And how much would somebody be willing to pay for it? Internally at organizations, there's a lot of different ways to do this. I mean, like most companies work in some sort of cost allocation benefit, right? Where they would allocate a certain amount of budget, or lines of business allocate budget into IT. When I was running an IT shop, my budget came from the lines of business where they were allocating a certain amount of their money into my organization. That is how you would technically do it. If you say, if you were to pay for data, could you figure out a way to actually kind of integrate this into your FP&A processes, financial planning and analysis processes, where you actually put a value on the data? I would argue you can. And again, I would absolutely recommend kind of reading Doug Laney's book on this. It's brilliant. It has stood the test of time and kind of goes into how you would actually get into valuing data, but it's critical.
Absolutely. The other exercise I would encourage people to do is study value stream mapping and understand how to apply that to your data flow. Right. So the essence of value stream mapping is looking at sort of end-to-end, customer value creation. Right. So it's not process mapping. That's a bit different. Value stream is talking about the external customer. and understanding, the flow of value from when, say, an order is placed to when an order is fulfilled, for example, right? Something that adds value to the end customer. This will also unlock, I would say, a lot of, potential value in terms of freeing up bottlenecks, eliminating waste, and understanding what value is along that value chain of delivery. At the end of the day, again, a business exists to satisfy customers with products, right? And so this is perhaps another lens through which to look at things. Some things you want to look at is like process time, lead time, and there's a really good metric called percent complete and accurate that for data is like phenomenal, right? So how much of the data is there? How much is it correct?
Yep.
So it's a metric that would show you basically how good are your processes, how good is this investment at the end of the day? Am I getting something out of it? And so, but yeah, Doug Laney's book, I haven't read it yet. I need to read it. Matt, you should read it too.
Infonomics.
Infonomics. But I'm glad these discussions are happening. Like I said, for the longest time, before data was like the cool thing. Again, it was, for, at least for me, I can only speak from my experiences, but it was always tied back to just who are we working together as a team, whether it's sales, marketing, finance, whatever, supply chain, and like, are we executing on what we need to execute? Data was just a part of that, but we never called it. Data was never separate. I think it's sort of this divide we have right now as well, where data is now seen as like, data science, I think, sort of blew the door off this, where now it's like, oh, we have to hire a data team. And it's like, well, back, at least when I was getting started, it wasn't really a data team. And like we are accountable to different areas of the business, but it wasn't like we're kind of an island on our own, right? So we get back to
I
that.
couldn't agree more. I think the kind of the split by pushing data into IT, it caused a lot of problems. I think this is kind of one of the underlying kind of operating concepts of the data mesh, right? Which we were talking about earlier, which is kind of empowering end users within business units or domains, whatever you want to call them, to have more kind of freedom and more control and more autonomy. The challenge there, though, is that and this is like in the first 2 or 3 lines of Zamok's book, is that the data mesh is an analytical construct, right? It's about analytics, right? It's not about operational uses of data. It doesn't speak to the operational uses of data. And as far as I'm concerned, whatever architecture you want to implement, whether that is a data fabric, a data mesh, or a data Rube Goldberg device, I don't care. Whatever your operating kind of model is from a data management perspective, must by definition include not only analytical uses of data, but operational uses of data. They both have to be considered as a part of how you manage data within a data and analytics organization. Because if you're not looking at the operational uses of data, that's where the money gets made. That's where the rubber hits the road. That's where data gets operationalized in a CRM system or ERP system. So analytics is only half of the equation here. Operations is the other half.
Absolutely. It's the thing I'm noodling on with respect to data modeling is sort of looking at it more. Currently, we tend to view data modeling, especially physical modeling, as very siloed activities, which to some extent makes sense. But it misses the broader context of the data lifecycle and sort of how data flows, right? So data is like water. It just is, and so you got to think of it as a continuum. But at the end of the day, you're also dealing with water. So you have to go step back and understand the larger construct of, well, what is water? And maybe it flows in different areas, but it's still essentially the same thing at the end of the day. It just maybe evolves and so forth. But that's, that's how I'm starting to view data is it's I don't know if it's a Zen-like approach to it or whatever, but I think it's a realistic view of it where you can't view these things as just silos anymore. You have to look at it like analytics is a part, like you say, it's not the entire universe. But as quote data people, we want to view the world through a analytics or ML viewpoint, right? Software engineers view the world as being, largely, what's the data I'm using for this app, right? And so it's,
well, right. It's that separation, right? And to your point about the water, maybe connective tissue. I mean, pick your metaphor; it doesn't really matter. You have to do both, and this is kind of my concern isn't the right word, because I'm not concerned. I mean, the underlying concepts of the data mesh are fantastic, right? As an analytical construct, right? I think it makes complete and total sense. But if your CEO asks, how many customers do we have? There's only one answer. right? And that answer by definition is a cross-domain answer. It's a cross-functional answer, right? So I guess you could argue that the C-suite could potentially be its own domain, right, within a data mesh. But if you're talking about data that is widely shared across the organization, that flows that is the connective tissue, that is the water that is flowing between sales and marketing and finance, or supply chain and product management, right? And whether it's product data, customer data, anything, there is data that is widely shared. Generally, it's called master data. There is data that is widely shared across the organization, and the answers there need to be at a certain level of the organization, right? One of the ways I look at this is that at a functional level, if there's kind of roughly 3 levels of an organization, there's kind of like independent business domains, then there's cross-function, and then there's like C-level, right? Enterprise-wide, right? At a lower level, everybody can have their own definitions and everybody can have their own analytics. That's fantastic. Data mesh, run with it. That sounds great. Build data products. Be maniacally focused on meeting your data consumers' needs, right? That's great. But at that cross-functional level, where data is flowing across the entire organization, you need consistent governance. You need consistent data quality standards. You need consistent semantics. And how do you do that, right? I'm totally excited. I'm both petrified and excited about AI. At that level, right? Like I'm both concurrently excited and petrified, because I think I was having an interesting conversation last week with Tom Redman about what he calls a common language, right? And how do you have getting back to semantics, how do you have a common language? And I think increasingly what we're going to see, and this is true from a data modeling perspective, by the way, I'd love your input on this, but I think what you're going to see is AI is the common language, right? Like where it will just figure out and resolve semantic differences that may exist within data, right? Or governance policies or data quality standards. It's just going to figure it out, right? And I know that this is a drastic oversimplification, but for a long time, humans were defining these data models, right? Yep. And is it unrealistic to think that in the future, not too far from now, AI is figuring these things out on the fly?
It could. So I've been noodling. This is the one thing that kind of threw me for a loop, and I talked about this in my 5 Minute Friday on my other podcast, Joe Reese Show, which you go subscribe to. But it's one of these things where I've because it's able to translate. Transformers are able to translate basically concepts. I wouldn't say concepts, but it's able to do translation in a sense that. Which I think would be appropriate for data modeling, right? So, and all too often we also think about data modeling from a structured data point of view, where there's a lot more to it, right? So it's about translating concepts, from different domains into something that's useful and understood and represents some slice of reality, right? And so that's what the lens through which I've been thinking about it. The physical implementations I think are somewhat secondary, but I've been thinking a lot about that too. But I don't see any, the conclusion is I don't see any reason why, these foundational models couldn't do it. In fact, I'd be super shocked. And so this is the one thing that's made, I expected this book to be done soon. This is actually throwing me for a loop. And it's having me go back to actually areas of philosophy to think about this a lot more deeply, because it feels this is, because again, you're what could happen is, right, so AI could just be making decisions for your business, I suppose, if it understands it, at which point what do you need data modelers for? What do you need employees for? I don't know. But this is like the one thing where I've been really sure, Skynet. What do you need anybody for at this point? But apart from existential things, I suppose it's again, you get into these philosophical discussions, but you have to, right? In these loops, because this is the essence of knowledge. And so the issue is a lot of these models are very black box, and you have no idea how they come to the conclusions they do, but they just do.
Yep.
This is but from a perspective of data modeling, I've been thinking a lot about this. Went on a hike the other day, and it's kind of all I was noodling on, which is this topic. It's complex.
Well, as we were talking about before we went live, I mean, if AI can use the entire internet prior to 2021 as a training set, it's most certainly can use every nugget of all of your data as a training set.
Sure.
Right? Like all transactional data, every weblog that's out there, every login, every
All
auth,
your images, all your videos,
everything, right? In theory, that data could be used to define your data models, to define your governance policies, to define your data quality standards, all the kind of the classic data management stuff, even your integration patterns, right? Historically, humans were figuring this stuff out and we're determining these things based on a desired set of outcomes, whether that outcome was, operational excellence, quote to cash, some sort of process, or whether it was an analytical outcome. Humans would figure out the outcome and work backwards from the outcome, and then we would get to a data model. I know I'm oversimplifying, but in essence, could a machine be doing that? Absolutely, a machine could be doing that. I mean, why not? Right.
Yeah.
And then you ask yourself the question of like, well, do you want to trust a machine to be doing that? And that's a separate issue. Can you explain it? Right. This is half the battle in data management. It's certainly half the battle in master data management, which is, can you explain what you're seeing? Can you explain to your users why they're seeing what they're seeing? If we can solve for some of those issues, I think absolutely machines could be doing a lot more of this stuff. And basically, that's the data fabric. Mm-hmm. Right. The data fabric is this future world where data itself, yes, metadata, is defining its own classification and use. Right. How do I classify it? How do I structure it? How do I govern it? How do I define integration patterns? How do I define quality standards? Well, the data will tell you what it needs based on working backwards from those outcomes, when the outcomes are successful or when they're optimized or when they're not. So I mean, I think it's entirely plausible that we could be having AI driven and AI supported at the very least somewhere down the road where a lot of this stuff could be automated. Now, I've done a few posts on LinkedIn and people kind of respond, I know, emotionally to this. It's a spectrum, right? We're starting like entirely human driven to entirely machine driven. Halfway is this world of augmentation where it's still humans involved and they're being informed and augmented by machines. But we're most certain that horse is out of the barn, right?
Oh,
like yep. I mean, the last month, like I'm giving some presentations this summer on the future of MDM, and I'm having to go back and rewrite a lot of my presentation to your point, because it's like in the last month, things have drastically changed. It's crazy how fast
discussions you would have last year, for example, on MDM or any data topic would have been it would have been sort of a continuum of the discussions we've been having for the last few decades, and talk about the same stuff we always talk about, like let's deliver more value and how do we get more accurate data. But now, as you say, the horse left the barn on this one, and it seems like every week something new is happening, to the point where I'm just kind of like, I don't know, let's rethink this entire thing right now. And the other thing too is, a lot of these models, even if you go back to AlphaGo or chess playing ones or video game, I mean, it comes up with interesting ways of solving a problem given its constraints that humans would never have thought of. Right. So the thing I've been noodling on too is like, well, what can AI detect that humans just somehow have overlooked, and what are the blind spots and how we've been operating as businesses, for example? Like these are the things I've been thinking about, that, okay, maybe it could augment you in the sense where it helps you understand this is just a weird way of looking at your business that actually makes a ton of sense. Because there's a lot of groupthink, right? We have business school, we have established ways of learning about business and doing business and being professionals and all this stuff. And maybe there's a different way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's again, I may be really oversimplifying here, but it's a lot of excitement around unknown knowns, right? Like, and 3 years ago, we were talking about graphs and how graphs could be used to help you understand some of the unknown knowns by exposing relationships that you didn't know existed, right? Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of value there. Because 10 years ago, or maybe even 15, we were having conversations about Hadoop. It was really the unknown unknowns, right? And the pithy soundbite that I make about Hadoop is, and big data writ large. The big data was, finding a bunch of answers to questions that nobody in the business was asking, right? But now what we're seeing is these questions are actually being asked. We know the knowns, but what we don't know is the unknown, and that's what these things are helping us go find that we didn't realize before.
Mm-hmm.
I was at the recent Gartner conference in Orlando a few weeks ago, and the keynote was basically saying, hey, slow down here. We don't want another Hadoop situation when it comes to AI. And I really question that metaphor, because I mean, were millions of teenagers using Hadoop to do their homework? No,
Right.
but millions of teenagers are using ChatGPT to do their homework. Right? Like the value, it's there, right? The value is absolutely positively there. So yeah, it's exciting times, man.
The other thing I'd argue with Hadoop is that it wasn't so much that it was like a lost, generation of technology. It just got superseded by better things, right? It seeded the ground, and then all of a sudden we have these cloud data warehouse technologies and other things that could do the same job better. So basically, companies migrated away quickly. So to say just completely dismiss it seems a little bit ridiculous to me.
Well, I mean, they're not even the same. It's not even the same analogy either, right? So Hadoop is a way of processing data that people wrote some white papers on, and then became an open source project. And then I think that there's a big bit of data envy, so you always want to get the biggest data possible, and to get the throw Hadoop at your 100 megabyte data problem back in the day. So. But yeah, generative AI, I mean, I show my kids this, and we're doing homework all the time with it now. I mean, a lot of it's wrong. And the thing I like about it is, like, we did a word problem the other day, a math word problem, to check it. I mean, I don't know, I'm good at math, so I teach my kids how to do it the old fashioned way. And here's why it's important. Because because ChatGPT was wrong. Came back with the wrong answer. And if you didn't know where to look, you would have gotten it wrong, right? It was a simple multiplication thing too. It was like, those numbers just it doesn't make any sense how you came to that answer, right? So it's like, but teaching, I'm teaching my kids basically learn to work with the machines, learn to, but you got to have common sense. You got to know how this stuff works. Otherwise, as Charlie Munger says, you're a one-legged man in an ass kicking contest. It's not good for you. So.
Yeah. One thing that's just crazy, kind of like, this is a little outside the data and analytics world, but is just software engineering, software development.
Yeah.
Right. This does come back to data modeling. And like, what's happening there, right? Like, I was talking to one of my old peers at Gartner when I was at the event in Orlando, and where, often Gartner analysts will be brought in to kind of do like software reviews, and what do you think of this, or what do you think of that? Where one of my peers are telling me that somebody had used AI to build a data catalog, like a legit like data catalog, right? That people are paying money for today to go buy software, and somebody had used AI to build one, like from scratch in a couple of weeks. I was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Right. Like the speed of acceleration here from a software development and engineering perspective, right, is just mind blowing, right? Where we're going beyond just the automation of, like, highly rote processes, right? Like a login script, or some, like, web forms, or basic UI that is mundane and boring to kind of create and gets used over and over again. We're getting well beyond that. We're actually into like using AI to code and build, like, solutions for data management.
I was talking to some crazy, some senior software engineers, principal level engineers on Slack, a bunch more of my friends, and so their companies have budgets now for CoPilot. So they actually request that their engineers use CoPilot for a lot of stuff. And these are, again, very accomplished engineers who could, code whatever you want with their eyes blindfolded, and they would still get it right, with the Vim editor and stuff. And there's code editor, CoPilot still being used and, encouraged. And I think that's fascinating. These people, I would think, they're very curmudgeon-y too. They'd be the last holdouts, but they realize the value of this stuff, where it's like $20 a month for a business plan, and I can do what again? That saves so much time.
Disrupt yourself before you're disrupted.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Got to figure that stuff out. If you're in the software business, that's what you're going to need to figure out, is how do I disrupt myself before I get disrupted. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I would rather be on the offensive than on the defensive when it comes to this stuff. So, this is pretty much all software, right? I'm not just talking about data management, but it's most certainly relevant in our world. And it's things are happening fast. I was just watching a podcast over the weekend, talking about this thing called Auto GPT. Is it's out on GitHub, and where anybody can go use it, and it's generating like code. I mean, it's just crazy. But to your point about like GPT, like hallucinating, it still happens, but I think it's like a V1 product.
It's a V1 product.
That's just it.
Yeah.
In the same way, I mean, that's where maybe the analogy kind of holds with Hadoop, is that Hadoop was kind of a V1 product, very awkward to use. You have people hand coding MapReduce, and yet we were able to build on those technologies to build something much better. And so what's AI going to look like in 2 years and 5 years generating?
Yeah, I mean, Roy, he talks about how Hive is a data warehouse built on MapReduce. Absolutely. Now, no, I mean, Hive's old hat now. No, I don't know what, unless you have to use it, you're not going to use it. But that's just it. It's all about time saving. But it feels like these advances are happening on a daily and weekly and basis, where if you wanted to, I would wager that if you wanted to write a solution to make your own data catalog, and somebody in the comments here said that they used AI to build a data catalogs, I'd absolutely believe them. I mean, I think you could come up with even using kind of was it llama or something like that. So if you want to use it for research purposes, which Facebook released, you come up with a pretty good approximation for something, just applying it to your own data and seeing what it can do. In fact, data catalogs are an interesting one. I was talking to somebody at one of the big data catalog vendors, and they're actually getting some interest to use generative AI models on the data catalog, because that's a good way you can comb the domain knowledge of your business, right? If you try and attach it right to your data warehouse, I mean, the fair point is that columns are named weird sometimes, and it doesn't provide the best context of stuff. And so catalogs do, though, hopefully, if it's done right. Might be
to your point though about your example with the math and your kids, right? Like, there's still going to be value. And I look at maybe another metaphor here is like, photography and digital photography. That's like a passion of mine. I like to take pretty photos. And, I still need to know some basics about how the camera actually works, right? I need to know how the shutter works. I need to know what an f-stop is, right? I still need to know these things, even though the camera is doing a lot of the lifting for me. I still think that there's knowledge there that needs to be built. But, what I'm finding is that when I ask GPT some of the questions that I was asked often as a Gartner analyst, the answer that I get back are pretty good. They're not exceptional. They're just pretty good. And so for me, and like my position and others that are kind of experts and professionals in the data management space, I don't think we're going to be automated away anytime soon. However, I have the luxury of building a 30-year corpus of knowledge, right? I have because I was able to work my way up. Now, if I can use AI to basically replace entry-level people that like the first or second or third year consultant that's working for Deloitte or McKinsey right now, that is kind of gaining those stripes. If I can automate that and get the same level of insight that I'd be getting from a relatively junior person, how are those people actually going to gain the knowledge? How are they going to get to the point where they're 30 years from now, they're experts in it? So, I mean, it's about disruption, and it's about figuring out, okay, well, what do I need to be? Does that mean I need to become a better prompt engineer, right? And asking the AI the best questions? I don't know. I mean, it's just such a wild west right now. I don't think anybody has any answers.
No, I mean, I'm telling my kids, start thinking, they're 9 and 12, they're boys, and I'm trying to tell them, like, look, you got to figure out what you want to do in life that's doesn't have a good chance of being automated, right? Think about it from that angle. Think about what you can do that's very unique to you, and that you'll have a lot of fun doing, and maybe make money, assuming money's a thing in the future. But so it's the lens search I'm telling them. And then I'm gonna go speak to my 12-year-old's 6th grade class about AI. They've been talking about that. That's all they've been talking about, and you probably have a few things to say about that. And I also advise university. And this is one of the topics we're going to be talking about. I think they have questions about curriculum and, for their graduate studies. And I'm like, I think you're going to have to consider there's going to be a giant shakeup in the IT field very, very soon. And these are the things I would be encouraging the students to be paying attention to, not the stuff that's going to be outsourced to a machine very soon. So you still have to understand how it works, obviously. But it was interesting too. Mathematicians were one of the ones that were supposed to be automated anytime soon, or were among the biggest impacts of generative AI. Love your thoughts on that, Matt, since you're a math professor.
I've got to go read some of the papers. I mean, I know that they've been. So I was talking to Peter Trappa, who's my dissertation advisor at the University of Utah, and he's the dean of the College of Science, and he was saying that they're now using deep learning to generate. I don't know. They're generating new examples of mathematical structures, and then they can check them after the fact to verify that they're correct. And so they can kind of look at certain types of examples that would be hard to find by hand, and then verify them afterward. And so at this point, it's still a computational enhancement, right? We went from computational proofs some years ago, where you have have computers do automated logic checking, to deep learning where they're doing much deeper pattern recognition. And so then the question is, are we going to get to the point where a lot of the things we were doing in mathematics in the past maybe just aren't as interesting for humans to work on because machines are much better at them?
Yeah, or data products.
Or
to
data
bring it back to
products.
the topic, right? Yeah, it's like maybe AI is just making all the data products pretty soon. Well, it is a data product in a way too. So.
Well, I think that there's some really interesting stuff on the horizon, and I still remain incredibly optimistic about kind of the state of our data world. I remain incredibly optimistic because I see a lot of things that still need an awful lot of help. One example is like data hoarding, right?
Yeah.
And we hoard a lot of data. I was reading recently where, and the numbers vary, but I was reading recently where a research institute had said that data centers, okay, like so the data center industry writ large, generates more greenhouse gas emissions than the airline industry. Like, think about that. And somebody else was saying that anywhere between 50 and 70%, the number varies, the data of our data is dark, right? Like, we just hoarding it, it's just sitting out there. So if you kind of look at that Venn diagram, there's a decent chunk of data in data centers that is creating greenhouse gas emissions, that is consuming a ton of energy that doesn't need to be, right? Like, I foresee a world very soon where data and analytics leaders and CDOs and CIOs are actually given sustainability targets to hit, right? And can you get rid of some of this data? One of the things that I actually see as a possible solution here is more sharing of data. A lot of the data that I see over and over again is the same from company A to company B to company C. Everybody has a record for Verizon. If you're B2B, everybody's got a record for Verizon or a record for AT&T, right? And why in the world is everybody managing, governing, stewarding, applying data quality to the same data over and over and over and over and over again, right? When it's commodity anyway, if you can Google it, right?
Yeah.
But we're all managing a lot of data, you know, like it's a lot of data out there that could be shared in a more collaborative way. If you think about MDM as a way to break silos within one company, you could use it to break silos across companies.
That would be dope.
Right? Like, and that's what AI would actually be really good at, right? Is looking across and doing it in a PII, in a regulatory, in a compliance friendly way. Yes, there are issues there related to what you can and can't see, but like breaking some of these silos and allowing some of this data to be more widely shared. And in the process, we help to save the planet.
Completely agree. Yeah, I think it's going to force all this stuff's going to force a rethink of, I always say, how we've been approaching data for forever, right? Because if at the end of the day you're just trying to find answers, you know, to you know, actionable insights and all this stuff. I mean, what do you really need at the end of the day, right? Do we need all the ceremony of, you know, the modern data stack anymore? And I can make a pretty strong argument that maybe you don't actually. So
I think the cloud vendors already know
at the end
that.
of the day, then what do you need all this stuff for?
Right. The cloud vendors, I think, already know that, right?
Yeah,
Like
they know they're working on it. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, cool. I know we have to, Matt and I have to cut out a bit early. We have to get to some respective meetings, but dude, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. I felt like this could have just kept going for hours, and you know, well, maybe if we're down in Florida drinking some margaritas, we will. So, but awesome. For people who want to learn more about you, how can they find you?
LinkedIn. There's only 3 Malcolm Hawkers on the planet. Which is if spelled correctly.
I'm gonna ask
semantics
right now,
matter. But yeah, please connect with me on LinkedIn. Come find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest thing to do. I do have a podcast, the CDO Matters podcast. We publish every other week. So those are 2 ways that I would love to connect with everybody.
Awesome. Cool. It's yeah, great having you on. Upcoming stuff for us. PyCon is in Salt Lake City this week, so that's the big one. So Matt and I will be roaming the halls of PyCon, I guess, talking Python and whatever else, probably generative AI, like that seems to be all anyone's talking about now. Opining, yes, pontificating, as they say. Then what else? I'll be speaking at DreCon. That's on Wednesday, the 19th. Same day, we're doing Utah Data Engineering Meetup. Mother Duck showing up to talk all about mother ducking awesome things. And then what else is going on? Next Monday morning data chat, we got the founders of Cube.dev. They're going to be talking about headless BI and semantics and all that fun stuff. Then I'm in Munich next Friday, giving a talk at the Applied AI conference. So if you happen to be in Munich, come hang out with me. We'll get a beer or
A stein of beer.
a stein. Yes, many
Yeah.
steins.
Yeah.
So,
So for me, my next thing is I'll be speaking at the IRM Data Governance and MDM Conference May 10th in London.
sick. Awesome.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool. Well, yeah, awesome. Good to see you. Thanks to the audience. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.